Sid was a miserable loser who fought crime as a Temu vigilante until Truck-kun deleted him from life. Luckily, he gets reincarnated into a fantasy world as an overpowered prodigy. Now, he forms a secret society of elite warrior baddies to defend the world from evil, but will have to survive to all of them wanting a piece of him. It all started with a rich girl named Akane, whose butler wasn't answering his phone, so she was forced to walk home for the first time in years. However, on her way, she was abducted by some thugs, but she managed to steal a glimpse of Sid standing in the corner as she lost consciousness. She woke up in an abandoned building where the thugs revealed that they were waiting for her billionaire dad to send the money for her release. However, in that moment, Sid falls from the sky while dressed in a terrible-looking Batman cosplay he got from Temu. The thug leader tried to blow his virgin brains off, but Sid folded him in seconds, so the other thug decided to throw his firearm away and get into close combat with him, but Sid eventually got serious and started to brutally crushing him. Sid reduced the ex-military doofus to a bloody meat pile and released Akane in a very stylish manner, but he still wasn't satisfied because he felt that his struggles against the ex-military thug meant he still had a long way to go before achieving the power he had always dreamed of. Similar to how every kid dreamt of being a hero, Sid had Superman fantasies during his early years, but in his case, the passion for cartoon characters didn't die as he grew up, causing him to master every combat skill he could in order to get stronger while posing as a background character in the open. He kept training as hard as he could, but he eventually realized that it meant nothing, because combat training could never give him the overwhelming power that he craved, so he threw himself in front of Truck-kun so he could get reborn as a powerful Isekai main character. In the fantasy world, he now goes by the name Shadow as he wears some exquisite dark Assassin's Creed drip and has a legion of baddies who are loyal to him, as well as some overpowered magic, which he's determined to use in becoming the kind of character that controls everything in the world behind the scenes called the Eminence in Shadow. The day he began building his Shadow Empire was the day he reincarnated as the son of Baron Kaganu, who was an aristocrat living out in the boonies. For generations, the family has created powerful swordsmen who enhance their physical abilities using magic, and while his sister Claire grew up as an overpowered sword user, Sid posed as a lackluster swordsman who couldn't lace his sister's boots. However, in reality, he had an insane talent for magic and spent his nights dicing up groups of thugs like Batman. One night, he ran into a weird-looking magic creature which emitted a strange magic power, so he experimented on it for months until it transformed into a beautiful girl who he called Alpha. Back then, Sid told Alpha about his goal to purge the world of the cult of Diablos, which was something he made up to give her a reason to live. Then he introduced himself as Shadow and recruited her to join his cause. She had no idea that he was making stuff up, so she agreed to follow him as a subordinate, and immediately came up with some grand ideas, which involved expanding their organization and getting some funding. Sid officially named his new organization Shadow Garden, and gave her the name Alpha because she was the first one he converted to his disciple. 3 years later, Sid was training with Claire and letting her flex on him, despite the fact that he could end her in a million different ways if he pleased. Afterwards, Claire left to prepare for her trip to a prestigious magic academy, but when it was time for her to leave, the entire family was stunned by the fact that she was nowhere to be found. Sid met up with one of his underlings named Beta, who revealed that Alpha and the rest of Shadow Garden were already making moves to find Claire, and informed him that the perpetrators were high-ranking members of the cult of Diablos. Through nothing but dumb luck, Sid managed to pinpoint the location of the enemy's hideout, so he ordered Beta to gather the rest of the squad for a rescue mission. Meanwhile, Claire and her abductor were having a rap battle, but she lost it and broke out of her chains when he threatened to harm her bro, so he took her out with a punch. Before long, Shadow Garden showed up and easily took out every cult of Diablos member in their path before Alpha squared off against the abductor. She overpowered him but refused to unalive him because she wanted to extract some information from him. He injected himself with a weird drug that made him go berserk and ran into another part of the dungeon where he saw Sid in his escape path. He charged at Sid hoping to land a brutal slash on him, but Sid literally schooled him while tearing him apart with brutal slashes. The abductor took even more of the drug that made him transform into a deformed version of the Hulk as he charged at Sid again. Sid blocked all his attacks before taking him out with one powerful magic sword slash. The next day, Claire returned home and set out for the royal capital. Shadow met up with the Alpha and the rest of Shadow Garden, who informed him that it was time for them to say goodbye to him. The next day, Sid was in a bus, and he thought about the words Alpha told him the previous night about how she and the girls needed to scatter in order to face off against the cult of Diablos, leaving him to fight a solitary battle on his own as the Eminence in Shadow. He arrived at the royal capital named Midgar, where he enrolled in the same prestigious magic academy that Claire did, and made friends with two of the biggest NPCs in school, named Skell and Poe. The three of them boarded a bus together where they reminded him of a little promise they made between themselves, where the person who scored the lowest in their test had to confess his love to the prettiest girl in school named Alexia and suffer a brutal rejection. Despite watching a student get coldly rejected by Alexia, Isekai'd was excited to do the confession because he felt it was the perfect scenario for a mob character like himself. That evening, he mumbled words and shivered around like a drunk monkey as he confessed his love for Alexia, fully prepared to get rejected, but faced a massive shocker when she accepted him. It didn't take long before their unlikely relationship became the talk of the town at school, and things got even more crazy when Alexia came by to have lunch with him. He started to act like a filthy swine in order to get her to break up with him, but instead she offered to take a fencing class with him that afternoon. During the fencing class, Isekai'd faced off against Alexia and noticed that she was fighting in a very plain manner that even his nerfed version could keep up with, and afterwards, she told him that she hated his sword style because it matches hers. Alexia had a bit of an argument with the fencing instructor named Zenon, which revealed that they were betrothed, and Isekai'd realized that she only agreed to date him so she could get away from Bro. She admitted to it when she met up with Isekai'd by the water fountain that evening, and started teasing him over the fact that he asked her out because he lost a bet with his gooner buddies. She told him to continue acting as her boyfriend for the meantime, and he tried to refuse but folded like a dog the instant she brought out some money to bribe him. The two of them continued to play out their fake relationship in a flashy manner, and Isekai'd slowly realized that this perfect princess was more of a rascal than anyone knew about. During an ice cream date, she revealed that she didn't like Zenon because he had no flaws, which made him sus to her, unlike Isekai'd, who was a walking basket of imperfections. 2 weeks later, the two of them were in a carriage where Alexia told Isekai'd about how she'd always wanted to be as good as her sister Iris, who was the most powerful swordswoman in the kingdom, but ended up being mid. When Isekai'd said he liked her fencing style, Alexia said her sister said the same thing to her, after she fumbled at a sword festival, which made her hate her sister's fencing style ever since. Isekai'd tried rizzing her up, so she pointed her sword at him, but retreated when the bus driver came by and ended the relationship as she walked away. The next day, Isekai'd and his friends are surrounded by some guards who informed him that Alexia was missing and arrested him because of the fact that he was the last person to see her. Alexia woke up in a prison where she noticed that she was being held by magic-suppressing chains and saw a deformed monster chained up in the room with her. When a weird doctor came by and extracted her blood, she asked for his intentions, so he mumbled some nonsense about how he was going to resurrect a demon with her royal blood. Meanwhile, the guards brutally tortured Isekai'd while interrogating him, but he enjoyed every minute of it because it made him look very much like a background character. The creepy doctor suddenly went into a meltdown as he told Alexia about how his lab was destroyed by a bunch of people when he was excommunicated, and then he started beating up the monster in the corner. When she stopped him by reminding him to continue taking her blood, he force-fed her some terrible food he'd been keeping out in the room. At the same time, Zenon met up with Iris, who ordered them to release Isekai'd based on the fact that he showed no signs of being connected to her abductors. She told him to maintain order at the academy before noticing that Claire was being held back by students while trying to save Isekai'd. That evening, Isekai'd was released from prison, and he resisted the urge to heal his wounds instantly because he wouldn't fit his mob character persona. He met up with Alpha in his room, who gave him some food before informing him that the cult who kidnapped Alexia was draining her blood, implying that she'd die if she wasn't saved soon. She asked if she should dispose of the two men who beat him up during his interrogation, but Isekai'd told her to stand down because they were only doing their job. Later that evening, Isekai'd decorated a room with a bunch of expensive items which he bought using all the money he's stolen from criminals, and met up with Beta, who told him that their forces were ready to begin their attack on the Diablo's cult hideouts. He gave her an envelope which provided some information before aura farming on his way out of the room. In an alleyway, some knights tried to frame Isekai'd for Alexia's kidnapping, but Isekai'd destroyed them in no time, using his slime magic, and the rest of Shadow Garden began their attack on their enemies. Iris heard about all the commotion going on and decided to head out to the front lines to save her sister. Back at the prison, the weird doctor injected the deformed monster with a vial of Alexia's blood, which transformed it into an even more terrifying monster that immediately unalived him. Alexia was stunned when the monster broke her out of her chains, and it destroyed the entire building as it went on a rampage. On her way out, Alexia met Zenon, who informed her that he was the one who hired the doctor to kidnap her for his research so that he could become a high-ranking knight. She attacked him, but he easily blocked her attacks, so she charged up her swords with magical energy and attacked again. He used a tricky move to block her attack and knocked her into the puddle nearby and started bad-mouthing her, saying she'd only be a cheap knockoff of her sister. Just then, Isekai'd made a dramatic entrance as he introduced himself as Shadow, the one who lurks in the shadows in order to hunt shadows. Zenon revealed that all the underlings which Shadow and his crew had crushed so far weren't real Cult of Diablos members, unlike he who was a core member of the faction. He charged at Shadow with full intent to cleave his head off, but Shadow easily dodged his attack and started trolling him. At the same time, The deformed monster walked through the city and crushed everything in its path until Iris made a dramatic entrance by slicing off one of its limbs. The monster healed itself easily, so Iris charged up her sword with magical energy and delivered several more attacks, which it ended up regenerating from. Iris decided to slice it up into tiny pieces so that it couldn't regenerate anymore, but while she was in the process of doing so, Alpha stopped her and said she was only making the monster suffer. Alpha felt pity for the monster as she made her sword glow with angelic light and landed a powerful slash that vaporized the monster's body, revealing a human body underneath. Iris tried to question her, but Alpha told her to stay out of Shadow Garden's way as she left. Meanwhile, Seed and Xenon were clashing swords, and Xenon decided to take things to the next level by powering up with a dark aura, but he was still no match for the Supreme Aura Farmer. They clashed even more intensely, and Alexia was impressed because Shadow's sword style was very reminiscent of the ordinary fencing style which she practiced. Shadow slashed Xenon in the chest and introduced himself once again in the most badass way possible, so Xenon decided to crank things up a notch by taking a whole bunch of power-up pills that transformed him into a strong beast. He started yapping about his new power level before charging at Shadow with so much intensity that it caused a shockwave, which pushed Alexia out of the area. Seed still parried his attack and used his face as a punching bag before calling him a worthless excuse of a villain. Seed covered up the entire area with glowing purple aura and narrated how he'd created a spell which harnessed the power of a nuclear explosion. Xenon tried to attack him again, but his sword shattered before it could make impact with Seed's body. Seed then charged up his sword with aura while casting an almighty nuclear magic attack named I Am Atomic, which caused a massive explosion that destroyed the area along with a huge portion of the city. Afterwards, Alexia picked up a sword and started practicing until Iris came by and tearfully reunited with her. The next day, Alexia met up with Seed and blushed as she asked him to continue playing the role of her boyfriend, but he declined her offer. A while later, the girls of Shadow Garden had a meeting where they glazed Shadow for the gigantic spell he cast the previous day, until Alpha asked for a status report. Beta revealed that another Shadow Garden member named Zeta had found one of their targets, while another member named Ida was moving forward with her personal research. Alpha brought up a letter which showed that a mysterious group had been doing mischievous acts in the city while calling themselves Shadow Garden, so Gamma said it was only a matter of time before they fought the culprits. Meanwhile, Iris met up with two guards named Glenn and Marco, who she tasked with being part of a new investigation team that would go after the cult of Diablos in Shadow Garden. She opened a box which revealed a weird artifact, which she said was their only clue and said they needed to find someone who could decipher it. Elsewhere, Seed ran into a clumsy girl and instantly rizzed her up when he tried to pick her from the ground. Sometime later, a man was attacked in an alley by a mysterious hooded maniac who kept saying, "We are Shadow Garden," over and over again. Elsewhere, Seed was having lunch with Skell and Poe, who invited him to join them on a trip to a place called Mitsuhoshi, where they could get chocolates to rizz up girls, and he agreed to join them on this virgin adventure. Meanwhile, Iris showed the artifact to the clumsy girl from earlier named Sherry and revealed that they confiscated it from one of the facilities of the cult of Diablos. She asked Sherry, who was known as the most brilliant mind in the kingdom, to decipher the artifact, and Sherry's dad, who was the assistant principal of their school, encouraged her to comply with the princess's request. Sherry agreed, so Iris decided to put Glenn and Marco in charge of taking care of her during her research, and Alexia requested to help with the investigation out of curiosity. Seed and his friends arrived at Mitsuhoshi, where a service girl offered to take Seed on a little tour. She took him to a building where Gamma and her underlings were gathered. Gamma revealed that the store was her doing, and Seed was really stunned by how smart she was despite her lack of physical ability, which made her trip all the time. Seed sat on the throne which they prepared for him and gave them a shower of bright purple mana as a reward for glazing him. He asked how well the store was profitable, so she revealed that they were doing well because they had franchises in the major cities in and outside of the kingdom, and were using a mail order system to expand their influence to more remote regions. She brought a huge pile of coins, which she said was 1 billion zeni she'd made from her business so far, and Seed was absolutely stunned by this. She told him about the assassin who was posing as a member of Shadow Garden, and assigned a new member of her unit named Nu to be his personal aide. After getting some chocolate with his friends, they tried to rush back to their dorm in time for curfew, but Seed sensed a battle going on in the area, so he made up a goofy story about having to take a dump, so they would ditch him. After they left, he got into shadow gear and watched as Alexia fought against the villain in a dark alley. When Alexia managed to disarm him, she was surrounded by some more hooded figures who started attacking her. Before long, they had her cornered, and Shadow saved her at the last minute before chasing after the hooded men. He chased them all the way to a roof where he destroyed a bunch of them, using his lethal slimes before leaving Nu to finish off the remaining fodders. Afterwards, Alexia informed Iris that the people causing havoc in the city weren't the real Shadow Garden, causing Iris to remember her brief encounter with Alpha. Alexia asked who the real enemy was between the Cult of Diablos and Shadow Garden, and Iris replied that they both were because she didn't intend to allow anyone to wreak havoc in the city. A while later, Seed and Poe watched as Skeld tried to rizz up an upperclassman using the chocolates only to get pummeled by her boyfriend. When Poe left to try his own luck, Seed ran into Shelly, who was trying to decode the artifact, and left her some chocolate. That evening, Shelly's dad showed up while she was eating the chocolate and gave her a bit of romantic advice, which made her thank him for adopting her. The next day, Seed met up with Nu, who was disguised as a regular student at his school, and she informed him that the man they faced the previous night was brainwashed, which was a shared trait of the Cult of Diablos vanguard called the Third Children. She explained that this group operated by taking orphans with magical altitude and children of poor families and administering brainwashing drugs to them in order to convert them to cult members. She added that the cult has been doing this for many years and suspected that the cult's goal was to use the name of Shadow Garden to lure the real Shadow Garden out of hiding. Nu informed him that they recently confirmed the presence of a named first child in the royal capital named Rex, and explained that a first child referred to the one who had maintained his sense of self, despite being one of the brainwashed children. Seed replied by mumbling some nonsense about the upcoming sword festival, which his friends registered him for, but Nu translated it as some divine wisdom he was spewing, which she was yet to understand. During the sword festival, Claire easily obliterated her opponent, and the next match was between Seed and the student council president named Rose, who was the top swordsman at the academy. When the match began, Seed used some fake blood as well as top-tier acrobatic skills to pretend like he was clapped by Rose's first attack. Determined to embody the role of a mob character, Seed demanded to continue the fight so he could show off more of his NPC techniques, and he indeed got bodied about 100 more times. Rose saw his foolish facade as a display of warrior spirit, so she decided to use a supercharged attack on him, but the referee stopped it by declaring her the winner before the attack could land. Afterwards, Seed was all bandaged up as he walked through the school, and he met up with Shelly, who handed him some cookies before asking to be friends with him. When he agreed, Shelly cheerfully told her dad, who was named Lutheran, and Seed instantly recognized him as a master swordsman who was at one point a champion of the sword festival. Lutheran told Seed about the fact that Sherry was focused on a research about the mysterious artifact and begged Seed to be good to her since she had no real friends, but Seed was worried that getting close to such a cutie would ruin his mob character lifestyle. A while later, Alexia was having some tea in her room when Shelly came by to see her. Alexia asked why she came by, so Shelly brought up the fact that Alexia was in a relationship with Seed and asked if they were still dating. Alexia said that they'd broken up and revealed that they were only pretending to be a couple, which Sherry was very happy to hear. The next day, Seed was chilling with the boys in class when a mysterious armored cult member and his allies created a massive force field, which covered up the school. Seed tried to use his slime magic, but realized that magic wasn't working. Just then, some hooded figures showed up at the school and introduced themselves as Shadow Garden, before claiming that they were going to take over the school. Rose drew her sword in order to face them, but a mysterious artifact they were carrying erased the magic from her sword, which allowed the hooded assassin to shatter her sword. The hooded assassin tried to land the finishing blow on Rose, but Seed pushed her out of the way and got slashed instead. Rose was stunned by the sight of Seed laying in a pool of blood, and she mourned him while thanking him for sacrificing his life for her. The assassin took her as well as all the other students to the school auditorium, and after they left, Seed pounded his heart with magic energy until he reawakened. He used a background character technique he called 10-minute death heartbreak, where he used magic to control the flow of his blood so he could maintain regular blood flow to his brain even when his heart stopped. The move was extremely dangerous because one wrong move would have sent him to the afterlife, but Seed was determined to keep up his mob character facade even at the cost of his own life. Meanwhile, Sherry was doing some research when Rex broke into her office to steal the artifact, but Glenn showed up just in time to stop him from harming her. He introduced himself to Rex before ordering Marco to fight Rex's accomplice, which gave Sherry a chance to escape with the artifact. Seed observed the situation of the school from above and realized that they'd gathered the hostages at the auditorium, wiped out the guards, and left the night order, unable to enter the fray because of the magic field. They also had some assassins around the school in case of any hidden students running around, and Seed slowly started sniping them off one by one using slime arrows while waiting for nightfall, where he could make his cool entrance as Shadow. Sherry ran desperately while trying to get the artifact to safety, and Seed secretly took out every assassin in her path. When she tripped on the stairs, he caught her, and they stayed in a deserted room where she found a book that gave them some answers about their current situation. The book revealed that the object that was blocking their magic was called the Eye of Avarice, and revealed that the item didn't affect the magic of the attackers because the artifact could be coded to remember the magic frequencies of certain people. She revealed that the artifact was capable of revealing all the magic power it had absorbed at once in one big blast, and presumed that the invaders planned to absorb the magic from the students gathered at the auditorium to blow up the school. He asked if there was a way to fight it, and she revealed that the artifact which they had previously was the control unit of the Eye of Avarice, which could stop it from releasing magical energy. She said she planned to head to the auditorium after defeating the artifact through some hidden tunnels and use the artifact to stop the Eye of Avarice. However, she realized that she'd left all the tools needed to fine-tune the artifact in her study, so Isekai'd offered to go get them for her. Meanwhile, the mysterious armored knight told Rex to go retrieve the artifact from Sherry, and on his way, he ran into Isekai'd, who took out all the guards surrounding him in the blink of an eye. Out of desperation, Rex cast a magical net, which was meant to be the ultimate defense. But Isekai'd appeared behind him and kicked him around like a football before destroying him. Isekai'd met up with Nu, who informed him that Shadow Garden had infiltrated the academy and were now awaiting his orders. Isekai'd gathered up some random science equipment and told her that they were going to use these tools to fine-tune the Eye of Avarice before sunset. After hours of tinkering with the science gadgets at her study, Shelley finally managed to fine-tune the artifact, and Isekai'd said some final words of motivation to her as she made her way to the auditorium using a secret tunnel. At the auditorium, the student council members tried to motivate Rose to make a move, but she said there was nothing they could do because the armored knight was emitting Goku levels of aura. Just then, the assassins started shooting up some students, and Shelley arrived at the auditorium, where she successfully neutralized the Eye of Avarice using her artifact, allowing Rose to take out one of the assassins. Rose announced that their magic had returned, so the students started fighting back against the assassins. She tried to go after the armored knight, but some assassins blocked her off, and it didn't take long before Isekai'd made a dramatic entrance as Shadow. Isekai'd risked Rose up by calling her a beautiful sword welder, and announced the arrival of the Shadow Garden as his underlings started squaring off against the assassins. Sherry searched desperately for her father but couldn't find him, and soon, a fire broke out in the auditorium. It didn't take long before the flames covered the entire school, and Rose informed Iris that the group that saved them were named Shadow Garden, which was the same name that the assassins went by. Shelley ran through the fire as she desperately tried to search for her father, and the armored knight tried to burn up all her research before he was stopped by Isekai'd, who identified him as the assistant principal Lutheran. Isekai'd asked why Lutheran was doing all the evil stuff he was doing, and Lutheran replied by narrating how he used to be the top swordsman of their world, but eventually lost everything as he started looking for ways to cure his disease. During his travels, he ran into Sherry's mother, who was a top-tier researcher, and unalived her in order to take the Eye of Avarice from her, before taking Sherry in as his own daughter. The two of them drew swords, and it only took a split second for Lutheran to send Isekai'd flying out of the window as a bloody mess. However, Lutheran didn't get a chance to power walk out the room before Isekai'd re-emerged as Shadow and challenged him once again. Lutheran combined the artifact to the Eye of Avarice to transform himself into a being which he claimed had powers being human understanding, but Isekai'd blocked every attack he tried to land before slashing him brutally. Lutheran tried to land a second wave of sword slashes, but Isekai'd lectured him about how much of a low-budget Madara he was before tearing him apart. Sherry cried out when she saw her father lying on the floor as a bloody pile of trash, and Shadow left the area while thinking that it was better she didn't find out the truth about Lutheran. It didn't take long before Shadow was branded as the sworn enemy of the kingdom, who was wanted for many crimes including murder, but the ladies at Shadow Garden stayed determined to stand by him. The next day, Sherry met up with Isekai'd and thanked him for his help before informing him that she'd be going to study abroad at a science school because she had no other reason to stay in the royal capital. After saying her goodbyes, Isekai'd asked Sherry what she planned to do, but she replied that it was a secret before walking into her carriage. Given that the school was half destroyed, they decided to start summer break early, and most of the students traveled home apart from Isekai'd, who decided to stay in the royal capital. He was chilling in the balcony of his dorm when he got a letter from Alpha, which said it was time for them to settle some old accounts in a city named Lindworm, which was known as the Sacred Land. Elsewhere, one of Isekai'd's shadow girls named Epsilon used some slime magic to turn her washboard body into a full jiggly buffet, and she met up with Beta, who started trolling for having smaller melons than her. Nu interrupted their little bickering by informing them that Alpha sent them a message. Meanwhile, Iris and Alexia went to a mall where Alexia revealed that she was going to Lindworm, where she was planning to do some investigation into cases of corruption and missing orphans she'd been hearing about. Gamma walked into the room and introduced herself as Luna, the head of the mall, before treating them to some sweets. When Alexia revealed that she was going to Lindworm and needed some normal clothes to please a friend, Gamma suggested she got some sus clothes, which made Iris crash out. Iris insisted that Alexia went for some more decent clothes, but Alexia used some intense roleplay to pressure her sister into letting her get the others she wanted. At the same time, Rose went to the school hospital where she saw Isekai'd lying on a hospital bed, covered in bandages like a mummy, and told him that she'd completely fallen for him. The two of them boarded a train to the Sacred Land, where she asked if he was going for the goddess's trial, and he replied that he was going for it because he felt that it was the reason Alpha summoned him there. Rose held his hands and started yapping for hours about how she wanted to get married to him, but Seed managed to slip out of her grasp and went to another part of the train where looked at a piece of paper. Lindworm is a holy site where it's believed that the goddess condescended to alight upon the earth to grant power to 3 heroes. After 2 days of avoiding Rose's nightly advances at him, Seed finally arrived in Lindworm. Rose told him about a place called the Sanctuary, which was located within the steep mountains surrounding the sacred land, where it's believed that the left arm of the demon Diablos, which was cut off by a hero named Olivier years ago, was sealed away. Rose left Seed to go see her favorite mangaka named Natsume, and when Seed went through some of Natsume's works, he realized that they were just plagiarized stories from the real world. He thought the novelist would be a fellow reincarnated person like himself, but when he got to her stand, he saw that it was Beta who was using the stories he told her to make novels. She signed his novel with details of their mission, and when he checked it, he realized that it was written in an ancient text which he had no idea how to read. That evening, Alpha walked through the halls of a sacred building where she saw the body of a man named Archbishop Drake and wondered who unalived him before some guards walked into the area. Meanwhile, Seed noticed an assassin making a move on a strange building, so he intercepted him before Epsilon showed up and ripped the assassin into pieces. She informed him that the target had been eliminated by the Cult of Diablo's executioner, and while they managed to take out his henchman, the executioner managed to escape their grasp. They decided to move on to Plan B, and as Seed walked away, he realized that Epsilon was a very proud woman because of the amount of slime and used to power up her milk factories. Several days later, Seed went into a bath where he was having the time of his life in his birthday suit, and Alexia, who was just a few meters away from him, was about to lose her mind. He asked why she came to Lindworm, and she replied that it was because she was invited as a special guest for the goddess trial. When she asked back, Seed said he was invited by a friend for a fun event which was probably the trial as well. He asked what they did at the trial, so she explained that the goddess trial is a fighting ritual which took place annually on the one day of the year when the door to the sanctuary was opened. She revealed that ancient warriors awakened from the sanctuary to fight challengers, and also told him that he was too late because you could only join the trial if you applied in advance. She said the ancient warriors only answered the call of challengers they deemed worthy, which was why only 10 out of 100 that applied every year got to do battle. Alexia said she wouldn't be fighting because she was going to be investigating the death of the Archbishop and told him to join the Crimson Knights if he wanted to know more, but Seed instantly declined. When she made a joke about how tiny his trouser snake was, Seed proved her wrong by getting out of the pool to reveal his enormous Excalibur in its full glory, which made her jaw drop to the floor. On the day of the goddess trial, the Archbishop Jack narrated how the goddess Beatrix bestowed her powers upon the hero Olivier, which allows him to sever the left arm of the demon Diablos as part of the opening speech. Alexia was ticked off by the sight of the old doofus because he'd previously told her that she wasn't permitted to carry out her investigations, and also because Beta's massive airbags was making her feel jealous. When the trial began, a large magic circle enveloped the auditorium, which created a magic field that surrounded the area. Seed watched as several challengers failed miserably at getting an ancient warrior to face them, and he felt eager to show off his abilities as Shadow, but decided to watch from the sidelines like a regular background character. However, his plans suddenly went up in flames when he was announced as the next challenger, and everyone around was shocked that a student was being called up for such a massive event. He considered how horrible his options were and decided to appear on the battlefield as Shadow in order to confuse everyone. He introduced himself while farming as much aura as possible, and it didn't take long before an ancient warrior answered his call. Beta identified the ancient warrior who showed up as the Witch of Calamity named Aurora, who once reigned chaos and destruction in the world before using her exquisite melons to extract more information about the witch from Archbishop Jack. The fight started when Aurora fired a barrage of blood blasts at Seed, which he dodged while praising her technique. When she surrounded him with a stream of blood spikes, he noticed that she was lonely and decided to feed her by ending her in one brutal slash. He said he wished he would have fought her at full strength before flying off. Just then, the barrier surrounding the auditorium shattered as a strange red magic circle covered the area, and Alpha knew that the events that were unfolding were because of the fact that the sanctuary accepted Shadow's call. Seed went to a faraway rooftop and started gloating about his cool aura farming moment, until a mini version of the red magic circle appeared beside him. He tried to run away from it, but it kept following him, and he realized that it was connected to Aurora, so he decided to walk into the magic circle. Beta and the girls noticed that the magic circle was a giant door and wondered if any ancient warriors were going to come out of it. When the door started to open, Archbishop Jack tried to suggest they leave the area, but their exit plans were halted when Shadow Garden members surrounded them. Alpha asked Alexia and Rose to behave themselves until the door closes again and told Epsilon to keep an eye on them, while she and the rest of the Shadow Girls went into the door. Epsilon sent her squad members to take Archbishop Jack into custody, but he pulled an Uno reverse as he summoned the executioner named Venom to attack them. Venom slashed away Epsilon's fake calcium cannons, but she wasted no time before reattaching them and sliding the executioner into pieces. Epsilon took Jack as well as the rest of the Shadow Girls into the magic door, and the two princesses couldn't stop themselves from jumping in as well. Now inside the sanctuary, the girls arrived at a secure area where the left arm of the demon Diablos was believed to be sealed after he was defeated by the hero Olivier. Alpha said they came to the sanctuary to find out the truths behind the cult of Diablos that were buried in the dark corners of history, and revealed that the hero Olivier was actually a woman who had the same face as her. She used her magic power to unlock the seals on the metal door, while revealing that the place they were in was a graveyard where many ancient memories were buried. The hero Olivier appeared beside her, and the two of them guided the rest of the team into the other dimension. At the same time, Seed met up with Aurora, who was tied up in some restraints, and freed her from her shackles. She suggested an alliance because they had the same goal of being free of that place, and revealed that they could achieve that by destroying the core, which was at the center of the sanctuary. She said they couldn't use any magic because they were close to the center of the sanctuary, and Seed agreed to protect her as they went into the next room. Alpha and her group arrived in a room which she said were the locked-up memories of the hero Olivier, and revealed that orphaned girls were experimented on in that room several years ago. Olivier was one of the few children who were compatible with the Diablo cells, which were demon cells implanted in children, and Jack started confessing that they needed to do it because they needed powers to fight against demons. Once Olivier matured and was given the power of the demon, she was given a quest which was believed to be vanquishing the demon, but actually turned out to be extracting new cells from Diablos. However, during the battle, the demon kept regenerating no matter how many parts they cut off, so a group of mages used an artifact to immobilize the demon, which allowed them to cut into the demon and gain cells which they used in creating the power-up drugs that the cult currently used. They went to another room where they saw the demon's arm in a vial, and Jack crashed out as Alpha revealed that the cult aimed to create a drug using these cells which would grant their members ageless immortality. The one who created this drug was none other than Jack, who named it the Beads of Diablos, and he'd used the drug to live for a ridiculous amount of time, only at the cost of his hair. Alpha revealed that the first flaw of the drug was that it took a long time for the effects to wear off, which was why he only took it once a year, and the second was that it can only be produced in very small amounts. Jack said they made about 12 a year, so Alpha pointed out that the 12 Knights of Rounds were high-ranking members of the cult, and revealed that Jack was the 11th Knight. Jack started to yap about the cult's goals, but his villain speech was interrupted when Delta stabbed him from behind. He respawned in a more powerful form and took Delta and Alpha to a white portion of the sanctuary where he multiplied himself as they prepared to attack him. Delta didn't hesitate to rip several of his doppelgangers to shreds, and when she tried to attack the main body, she realized that her magic was depleting. Jack explained that the closer they got to the center of the sanctuary, the more their powers depleted, unlike cult members who have a huge glow up in power when they get close to the core. Seed and Aurora walked into a portion of the sanctuary where they saw the aftermath of a war, and she took him to a spot where she saw a younger version of herself crying. She tried to unalive her younger self, but the dead soldiers on the battlefield reawakened as zombies and started attacking them. Epsilon and the rest of the girls encountered a zombie, but Epsilon refused to attack it and let it phase right through her before vanishing. She explained that the zombie was a memory that was only reacting to the Shadow Girls, who she referred to as possessed. Epsilon and her girls did some digging, and they realized that they would have been in the same situation which the zombie girls were in had Shadow not found them. Seed and Aurora destroyed a bunch of zombies together, but they worried that the battle could go on forever if they didn't get access to magic soon. Seed decided to take matters into his own hands by slaying the brat version of Aurora, and that took them to a room which had a sword planted on an altar which they realized was the center of the sanctuary. Meanwhile, Delta treated Jack's clones like beef jerky, and Jack was stunned that she still had a lot of magic energy despite the sanctuary nerf. When he created more clones, Delta activated her Bankai, which came in the form of a huge metal slab, which she used to crush all of them at once. Seed asked Aurora what they were meant to destroy, and she replied that it was a magic core which was on the other side of a locked door. Seed realized that he couldn't break the chains holding the door with the low-rent sword he was holding, so he tried to pull the sword that was planted on the ground, but it rejected him because the pathetic virgin was no King Arthur. Aurora read the text beside the sword, which revealed that it could only be pulled out by direct descendants, so he gave up trying to pull it out. Meanwhile, Delta was having a bloody feast with Jack's doppelgangers, and she ripped them apart so badly that they eventually got transported to another portion of the sanctuary. When Alpha approached Jack with full intention of cutting his head off, he desperately summoned the hero Olivier to protect him. Just then, Epsilon showed up and informed Alpha that they'd finished their research. They opened up a portal that led to the outside of the sanctuary, which they all walked through. And after they left, Jack saw notifications which informed him that Seed and Aurora were at the core, so he made his way there alongside Olivier. At the core, Seed and Aurora were having a chat when Jack showed up, and he wasted no time before ordering Olivier to battle them. Seed went into a sword battle with Olivier and got knocked around like a ping-pong ball by the hero. When Jack was about to order her to land the finishing blow, Aurora stopped them and told Seed that no human could ever beat Olivier in battle, implying that he should give up on trying to free her. Aurora Aurora said she would use her efforts to help him escape, and Jack nearly gaslighted her into working for him until Seed stopped them. Jack ordered Olivia to land the finishing blow on Seed, but when she pierced him with her sword, he smiled mischievously while saying he got her. Seed grabbed Olivia from behind and bit a huge chunk of her neck off in a barbaric manner, which made blood spill everywhere as she vanished. Jack asked how Seed managed to survive despite the brutal attacks by Olivier, so he explained that he protected his vitals during her strikes in order to stay alive. When he challenged Jack to a battle, Jack decided to reveal his trump card by releasing an entire army of Olivier's to attack Seed at once, but Seed said his time was up because he could now use magic attacks. Seed destroyed all the Olivier's that attacked him in a single slash, and explained that he was able to use magic in the center of the sanctuary because he tempered his magic until it was too solid to be absorbed by the sanctuary. Like a desperate fool, Jack ordered the rest of the Olivier's to attack Seed, and Seed easily held them off while telling Aurora that he planned to blast through everything in the room at once, rather than following the steps of pulling out the sword and unlocking the door. He covered the entire room in his glowing purple aura, and used a wide-range version of his I Am Atomic attack to destroy the entire sanctuary, while the Shadow Girls watched in awe of their master's power. Seed woke up in a forest where Aurora said some loving words to him, claiming that the time they spent together was her most precious memory, and gave him some instructions on what to do if he finds the real version of her before vanishing. Alexia told Rose and Beta about how she felt powerless and asked them to form a team with her in order to find out the truth of the world, which they agreed to. Epsilon met up with Alpha and reported the situation with Beta and the princesses, before revealing that the Witch of Calamity Aurora had another name, which was the Demon Diablos. Meanwhile, Gamma was listening to a desperate realtor give his sales pitch, until one of her underlings informed her that the liquid running through the streets was petroleum, which made her buy every property in the area. The Shadow Girls met up in their base and had some fun, until Gamma reported to Alpha that the Royal Chancellor of the Oriana Kingdom named Perv was going to be visiting the royal capital of Midgar soon. Alexia filled Iris in on everything she learned during the whole sanctuary incident, and Iris decided to win the upcoming Bushin sword tournament, so her voice could be heard by the rulers of Oriana and Midgar. Alexia asked what would happen if the cult of Shadow Garden invaded the festival, and Iris replied that they had powerful artifacts that would assure their safety. After Alexia left, Iris got worried because she desperately needed to gain the favor of the Night Order to make up for the fact that her Crimson Knights lost their most powerful members shortly after being formed. She determined that she had to win the tournament no matter what, and then heard some noises which came from Rose's training on the outside. Rose tried to emulate the swordplay she saw from Seed and the Shadow Girls, and shockingly noticed some red veins growing in her chest. Some days later, Seed watched from above as everyone in town was getting excited for the upcoming Bushin festival, and he cooked up a plan which was to conceal his eminent powers, enter the tournament while posing as a B-tier character, and end up blowing the minds of the judges and spectators. Seed met up with Gamma and told her about his plan to disguise himself for the Bushin festival, so she brought some fashion supplies to help with his makeover. She recommended turning him into a lazy man named Mundane Man, who was a dark knight with no skill who was disowned by his family and ended up dying an unremarkable death. Seed absolutely loved the idea, so they transformed him into Mundane Man and completed the persona by altering his voice and his posture to complete the weak appearance. Elsewhere, a knight named Anirecaps, who was one of the Kingdom of Vigalta's 7 Blades, met up Seed and advised him not to enter the Bushin tournament because he looked like a dehydrated hobo, but Seed told her not to judge a book by its cover as he walked away. Then a sturdy knight named Quentin blocked his path and started bad-mouthing him until he claimed that he was stronger than him. This ticked Quentin off so much that he punched Seed and tried to force him into giving an apology. When he tried to land another punch, Seed considered all the different ways of ending the thug, but decided to let himself get pummeled because he wasn't willing to fight yet. Anirecaps stopped him and advised Seed to quit the tournament if he didn't want to suffer permanent damage. She offered to patch him, but was shocked to see that he wasn't injured despite being hit with several heavy blows. She introduced herself to him. That evening, Seed walked through town while thinking about how an encounter with one of the favorites, such as Iris and Rose during the tournament, would be complicated for him, and his brainstorming was interrupted when Rose showed up. Rose told him about how she, Alexia, and Beta had formed an alliance to make the world a better place, before revealing that she would soon meet with her father to be introduced to her fiancé, Perv. She told him about how she defied all expectations of her to be a Disney princess and chose the path of the sword instead, despite her father's criticisms because of a masked swordsman who saved her when she was younger. She worried that her selfishness could cause her to betray her people and asked Seed if he believed in her, so he replied that he did before giving her a hamburger to calm her down. The next day, Seed met up with Skell, who told him about the ways of gambling until they were interrupted by a flashy knight named Goldie who was undefeated. Goldie acted like a complete doofus while trying to analyze the next battle, which was between a brute named Gonzalez and Seed, who was in his Mundane Man form. He predicted that Gonzalez would make quick work of Seed, but that prediction flopped as Seed pulled a Saitama and took down Gonzalez with one punch. Goldie revealed to Skell, who he was coaching on gambling, that the next match was going to be between Mundane Man and himself, implying that he should place a bet on it. That evening, Isekai'd was sleeping peacefully when Skale came knocking down his door to reveal that Rose had run off after stabbing her fiancé, and this left Isekai'd speechless. Beta informed Alexia that Rose fled to the north of the royal capital, and that the Oriana Kingdom was planning to handle it as an internal matter, as they sent word to the Midgar Kingdom asking them not to interfere. Rose is an exchange student and not a foreign student, so it would make more sense to judge her using Midgar laws, but doing that would have an adverse effect on the relations between the two kingdoms. Beta said Rose would be surely given some harsh charges given the fact that Perv was second son of one of Oriana Kingdom's dukes. And Alexia was worried despite knowing a royal like Rose couldn't be sentenced to death. She said they needed to find Rose before the authorities did, and Beta warned her that doing so could cause a conflict between the two nations. Beta told her to think carefully before they made their next move, but this made Alexia crash out as she said they could never abandon her, and they agreed to do some individual investigations to find out her whereabouts. After Alexia left, one of Beta's underlings reported that Rose was in the underground ruins, so she asked her to continue, keeping tabs on her location. A while later, Isekai'd walked through the hallway or the tournament grounds where he encountered a mysterious knight who said she was looking for an elf who she said was her late sister's daughter. When she pulled down her hoodie, Isekai'd realized that she looked a lot like Alpha, but he lied that he didn't know anything. She tried to cut his head off, but Isekai'd dodged the attack while making it look like a clumsy fall, so she picked him up and introduced herself as Beatrix. Meanwhile, Quentin met up with Anna Rose, who was watching the Bushin festival matches, and asked about what she observed from Mundane Man's fight, so she revealed that she noticed his hand moving right before the opponent went lights out. When it was time for the match between Goldie and Mundane, Anna Rose talked about the fact that Goldie was undefeated because he only fought opponents he knew he could beat, implying that he was yet to showcase his true power. Goldie tried to give Isekai'd the Levi Ackerman special, but Isekai'd dodged his attack before landing a slash of his own. Anna Rose noticed that Isekai'd cracked his neck at inhumane speeds, so he would be able to dodge the attack. Goldie decided to go all out by charging at Isekai'd with the full force of his golden aura, but all it took was one sneeze by Isekai'd to turn him into a broken mess. Quentin asked Anna Rose how Mundane defeated Goldie, so she explained that Mundane managed to sneeze right before impact in a way that put his sword in just the right place to land the final blow on Goldie. Elsewhere, Iris presented the security plan for the main Bushin festival to Perv and asked if they needed extra security for the event. Perv said they didn't because there was nothing going on in town, but Iris felt otherwise because she'd been getting some deadly reports. During the next day of the tournament, Isekai'd easily defeated Quentin and the crowd began to think that Mundane was no ordinary man, but they didn't mind because they felt he'd lose the first round of the main Bushin tournament to his opponent Anna Rose. On his way out of the arena, he met Anna Rose, who warned him that he wouldn't be able to beat her with his usual tactics, but Isekai'd replied by taking off some heavy weights, which he claimed were holding him back. At the same time, Rose defeated some guards who claimed that they'd make her pay for her crimes and ran deeper into the tunnels to escape their reinforcements. The next morning, Isekai'd was brainstorming on his bed about the best ways to Aura Farm when Skell came knocking on his door. Skell told him about the 1 million Zeni reward which would be given to whomever catches Rose and pressured him to join him on this wild goose chase. Isekai'd eventually agreed to join him, but it was because he wanted to avoid his sister Claire who came by, and not because of the money. On the way, Isekai'd got separated from Skell, and he started fantasizing about using the piano skills he gained from his real-world parents' forced piano classes to look cool as the Eminence in Shadow. He heard someone playing one of Chris Brown's songs on the piano in an opera house, so he went in to see if another person had been reincarnated, but was bummed to see that it was just Epsilon playing the songs he taught her. He asked her about Princess Rose, and she revealed that Rose had taken refuge in the tunnels, so he made his way there. Meanwhile, Alexia took Beta through an underground passage which she said was built to help the royal family escape in situations of crisis, and they discussed their suspicions about Perv on their way to find Rose. At the moment, Rose remembered how she saw her father for the first time in years looking like one of Mahito's curses. When she noticed Perv smiling suspiciously, she immediately rushed in to slash him, and that was the moment she became a criminal. She got to a certain point in the tunnels where she considered turning herself in as a way of stopping a war between nations before the growth on her chest began to throb in a way that hurt her. When she heard a piano playing, she followed the sound and got to a room where she saw Shadow looking majestic while playing one of Beethoven's classics. She gave him a round of applause, but he used a serious expression to ask her what she wanted. She replied that she wanted to stop the war, so he asked if it was worth putting down her sword. She yapped about wanting to make everyone happy, so he offered her the power to make her dreams come true. Isekai'd imbued some of his aura into her, causing the growth on her chest to disappear as she felt his magic going inside her body. He asked her to prove that she was still willing to fight, so when a bunch of Cult of Diablos members showed up, she easily destroyed them with a single swing of her blade. On her way out of the tunnel, she met Beta and Alexia, who she told to stay out of her way as she leaves to carry on her burden. This ticked Alexia off, so she started attacking her, and Rose fought her off until she used a power-up move to take the fight to the next level. Despite that, Rose still finished her off in no time and said her goodbyes to Beta as she made her way out of the tunnels. That evening, Isekai'd was walking on the road while gushing over how cool he looked during the piano scene, and he eventually ran into Claire. Before long, Claire was choking Seed out on top of his bed as a way of punishing him for breaking his promise to her, and she gave him a chance to redeem himself by offering him a reserved seat ticket for the Bushin festival so he could watch her fights. She revealed that she was chosen to represent the kingdom in Rose's absence and swore that she'd become the champion of the tournament. The next day, the main Bushin festival tournament began, and Seed went to the reserved VIP seat which Claire booked for him. There he met Iris, who was sitting right beside his seat, and she apologized for all the trouble she caused him during the whole Xenon incident. When Iris's friends asked who she was eyeing to win the tournament, Iris named Anirecaps as one of the most promising candidates and swore to them that she'd win the tournament regardless of how skilled her opponents were. Seed brought up Mundane Man, but was bummed out when Iris said she hadn't seen a single match of his, and friends said he was nothing more than a Walmart Sasuke. Iris revealed that Beatrix was the first champion of the Bushin tournament, who was hailed as a war goddess, and Seed decided to take a walk through the halls where he unfortunately ran into her. Meanwhile, Perv sat on Seed's seat where he tried to rizz up Iris, but she rebuffed his advances before asking why he was there. He yapped about how talented Anirecaps was and how he planned to recruit her as part of his army. He asked what she thought about Mundane Man, who was Anirecaps' current opponent, and Iris said she felt he'd most likely win because of how confident he looked. When the battle began, Anirecaps zoomed in front of Sid at a level of speed that would blitz Minato and tried to slice his head off, but Seed stopped her attack. She tried several other super fast strikes, but Seed dodged every single one before appearing behind her and revealing that she'd been fighting an afterimage. Seed suddenly tapped into his inner Wally West and started blitzing Anirecaps until she admitted that he was way stronger than her. She decided to use her last resort, which was a counterattack, but Seed dodged her counter before landing a brutal strike that finished her off. The crowd lost their minds, and Iris told Perv that she'd never seen anyone with the level of power and skill that Mundane had. Perv brought up the fact that she'd be facing him in the next round of the tournament, and she said she was confident that she'd beat him because the power he'd displayed so far was nowhere near her level. Iris eventually left to prepare for a match, and Perv walked away as well while telling his guard to investigate Mundane Man. Hours later, Anirecaps met up with Mundane and exchanged compliments with him before telling him about how she aimed to become just as strong as him one day. After completely obliterating her opponent, Iris met up with Beatrix, who offered her one of the McDonald's treats she got. That evening, Seed pondered about the perfect way to end his tournament run as he walked through the street until he ran into Claire again, who told him to watch her next match. The next day, Seed met up with Iris at their VIP seats again, and they had breakfast together until they noticed Beatrix getting held back by some guards. Iris intervened by telling the guards that Beatrix was a war goddess and giving her a VIP seat right beside her. Meanwhile, Perv fed the king a drug which reduced him to a puppet that could only follow his orders, and he spoke about how Rose was already showing signs of possession, which made her a prime material for the cult's experiments. Perv anticipated Rose appearing at some point, but planned to use his puppet to slay the king of Midgar if she didn't show up, which would start an international war that could lead to the destruction of Oriana. He knew his rank and status would be gone if that happened, but he didn't care because he'd already made plans to ensure that one of his puppets was the next leader of Midgar. The one thing he failed to understand was Mundane Man, because all his efforts to look into him came up dry, and he was also worried about how Shadow Garden could interfere with his plans. When he came by the VIP section with the king of Oriana Kingdom, Beatrix pointed out that the king stank worse than the breath of a bleach fan, causing Perv to crash out until he heard that Beatrix was the war goddess. He was now faced with a new problem because he knew he needed to get rid of Beatrix to ensure his plan succeeds. Iris walked boldly to face Mundane Man at the arena, and she was determined to end the match in one swing. But immediately the match began. She got a vision of herself dying the same way demons did in Demon Slayer, and that made her so terrified that she fell back. At the same time, Rose infiltrated the building and ran into some corpses that belonged to members of the Cult of Diablos before the Shadow Girl showed up and motivated her to move forward with her mission. Iris tried to regain her composure, but every slight movement which Seed made gave her visions of being torn apart, and she realized that he might be the most powerful man in the world. When she heard the crowd calling her a bigger fraud than Sakura, she charged at him with the full might of her magic powers, but when she got close, she realized that he'd tricked her into believing he'd unsheathed his blade. Seed easily blocked her attack and pinned her to the ground, and everyone in the stands couldn't believe that the almighty Iris just got treated like cannon fodder. Rose came by and apologized to her father for everything she'd done so far, and he replied that he'd forgiven her for her sins, which made her cry. When Perv started crashing out over the fact that the king didn't follow his script, Rose tried to stab him, but Perv pulled the king in front of him to take the hit instead. Rose tried to offer herself as a way of atoning, but Perv ordered some assassins he had in the area to stop her. Before they could reach her, Seed showed up as Mundane Man and destroyed them all in no time before revealing himself as Shadow. Rose recognized him as the man who saved her in the past, who she called Stylish Bandit Slayer, and thanked him for being her motivation. Seed told her that the battle wasn't over yet, so Rose ran off to complete her mission, and Perv's attempt to stop her failed, as he realized that all of his assassins were dead. Suddenly, Beatrix showed up and offered to stop Shadow, causing the two overpowered beings to clash swords intensely. Iris saw the moment that Mundane revealed himself to be Shadow, and this made her have a crash out of epic proportions. Seed and Beatrix had a heated clash in a secluded area, and it didn't take long before Seed started dog-walking her, using speed techniques. Just then, Iris showed up and decided to join the fight while using a sacred blade which gave her flame powers. She tried to barbecue Shadow with several swings, but Seed dodged all of her attacks before getting into another scuffle with Beatrix. The two ladies attacked Seed at once with their biggest hits, but he parried and blocked their attacks before changing his weapon to a pair of crowbars. He and the ladies clashed with so much intensity that they shattered all of the surrounding buildings in the area, and they got to another part of town where Seed invited them to attack him again. Meanwhile, Rose was approached by Alpha in an alley who offered her two choices, the first of which was to continue fighting alone, and the second was to fight alongside Shadow Garden. Rose chose to fight alongside them, so Alpha took her hand as they teleported together. Seed used the water from the nearby river to replicate Aurora's attack spell, and the Battle Queens dodged before Iris charged at Seed relentlessly again. Seed knocked her into the river, and Beatrix charged at Seed with so much intensity that she destroyed his crowbar, forcing him to switch back to a sword. After a bit of back and forth between the two, Iris rejoined the fray with a huge flame blast, but Seed blocked it easily before challenging them to try their best shot. Both of the Battle Queens attempted to use their ultimate sword attacks, but Seed easily blocked and stomped them both on the ground with overwhelming force. Iris started yapping about how there was nowhere for Seed to run, since the guards were all over the city looking for him, and this made him snap as he covered the entire city with his glowing aura, while claiming that there was no reason for him to run. Seed laughed maniacally and charged up a massive I Am Atomic spell, but this time he was only bluffing because he used it as a medium to escape the girls without causing any explosion. Several days later, Perv explained everything to his master, put him on another assignment to take over the kingdom, and Iris bid Beatrix farewell as she left the city. Meanwhile, Alpha took Rose to the ancient capital of Alexandria, which was the base of operations of Shadow Garden, and put a shadow girl named Lambda in charge of training her. Lambda added her to a squad with some other shadow girls and renamed her number 666 before tearing off her clothes. Meanwhile, Shadow was playing the piano in a separate room, and he aura farmer, while speaking about a new conflict, which would soon befall the kingdom. Who do you think would win in an aura farming contest between Shadow and Sung Jin Woo? Let us know in the comments. That's all for today's video. If you like anime recaps like this, check out this video here.